Hello everyone and welcome to my patch 2.3c tier list. As always, what I'm going to do is going to show you a large overview of each of the individual tier lists from Baron lane to jungle to mid lane to AD carry to support. Hopefully you can work out which list is which from this list alone. Screenshot this, feel free to zoom in, feel free to do whatever you want with it. All you need to know is that it is ordered from best pick at the top to worst pick at the bottom. And there's some small nuance from left to right, but realistically, for the most part, anybody on the same row are generally at the same level. The runes that you see in the bottom left of each character is essentially the rune that is the best choice for them in most situations, but there are also alternate rune choices on a lot of the champion models, which they are applicable to certain scenarios. Any major ones, I'll try and talk about them, but I can't cover all of them. I'll go through each of these individual tier lists in more detail as we zoom in on them, and then essentially we'll talk about some of the more interesting picks or any, more importantly, some of the changes that may have happened from the previous patch. First of all, though, thank you to G2A for sponsoring the channel. There is a reference link in the description below. And also, if you like the content, I'd really appreciate the subscription. Got some news. I have just started a new full-time job that isn't directly, linked to esports. Something that you guys might know is that I've worked in esports as a commentator for quite some time, and I have decided to take, or at least now decided, as I'm nearly 30, decided to take a job that is a bit more traditional. So I'm working for a PR and communications agency based out of London, whose primary clients are gaming companies. So I'm still working within the gaming space, but I've decided to utilize the experience that I have in gaming and esports and try and find a more traditional career path for myself. Mainly because I sat down and thought, and I just said, well, do I want to be 40 still commentating games when I don't really have because my job security is very limited in the job that I do, right? I don't know if I'm going to get hired or not, and so therefore I wanted something that I could say I know that I can wake up one morning and I have work, which is basically why I decided to make the decision that I've made. But the overall repercussions of that is that I may not be able to do daily videos anymore. I obviously will still keep publishing content, but it might not be daily. But that does give me more onus to make better content rather than just rushing out a gameplay video or something like that, which might not be best for my growth overall, but I have hit 100 and something K subscribers, so I'm really happy with where I am. All right, Baron lane, should we take a look at it? Fiora, I still think, is a bit of a queen of the Baron lane. That 40 health nerf definitely helped, I think, some min-maxing matchups, but for the most part, if you're a good Fiora player, you're still going to beat almost every matchup that you can see listed here. In fact, there haven't been many changes to Baron lane whatsoever. Patch 2.3c was a relatively small patch. However, what I have seen, a trend that I have noticed recently, is Kennen is becoming a little bit more playable. I don't know why, but he's just started popping up more and more regularly in my solo queue games, and I actually think Kennen has just shifted up a little bit from where he was previously. The new addition to this list is, of course, Lucian. Lucian is a new champion that came out, and I haven't done a tier list since Lucian and Senna were released, and Lucian is a very flexible role. I think his worst role, or at least his joint worst role, is Baron lane. I think he's best mid lane, but I think he is an okay Baron laner in some matchups. The problem with Baron lane is there are a lot of good gap closing kind of lockdown style carries like Fiora, like Camille, and if you're not careful on Lucian, you can very easily die. And there are a lot of tanks, and Lucian, once armor gets built up, Lucian can start to struggle to deal damage to them, but he's still a viable Baron lane pick, just maybe not absolutely insane. I did say I was going to mention some of the runes. Kennen has got Summon Airy. This is really good when you're trying to punish a melee matchup, but you do obviously lose a little bit of damage in the team fights, and Electrocute is there if you're just going for more single target burst. Malphite has got Grasp into LA melee matchup. I take Summon Airy only into ranged matchups because you're never going to proc Grasp as a melee matchup as Malphite, and I take Electrocute if I'm going AP Malphite. In terms of the rest of the Baron lane additions, nothing much changed down here. Vayne is still, I actually think Vayne is maybe better than I'm giving credit for. But what I would say about Vayne is you do need to be a good Vayne player, even if she is good right now, and I do think she is good right now. You do need to be a good Vayne player to really make use of her. Even if you win Baron lane, it's quite difficult because of what Vayne does to a team composition to win the game, because you're running an AD carry top, and because Senna is now released, and because you're obviously going to usually have an AD carry bot, you might end up having a really bad team composition with Vayne, which is why I've put Vayne down here. Even though I think on an individual level she's much stronger than B tier, she has a lot of good matchups in the Baron lane. I think she kind of messes up team compositions a lot right now, and it can, even if you pick her and do well in your lane, it may be that you end up losing the game because you just don't have a very good team comp with a random AD carry top. Same thing for Lucian, if I'm honest with you. Other than that, no major changes to the bottom end of the Baron lane. Teemo's still a devil and annoying to deal with, but the same reason as Vayne can lead to pretty bad team compositions in solo queue overall. We have had some shifts in the jungle. I actually think those Evelynn nerfs did hurt her. She's still very playable. You can see she's on the border of A/S tier, but I do think those hit her quite hard. I think, they have been... The problem with Evelynn, here is the Evelynn conundrum. Evelynn in this game has no counterplay. We don't have control wards, so we don't have wards that can reveal invisibility. So Evelynn in this game has absolutely no counterplay. And so that means that Riot needs to nerf her to a point where if you're a good Evelynn player, you can get ahead. But if you lose to an Evelynn, you aren't going to think, well, that was just unfair because she's got no counterplay. And because she has limited counterplay in this game compared to traditional PC, this is why Evelynn, I think, has to get nerfed, unfortunately, because Riot have not introduced the mechanics that can help deal with the fact that Evelynn is just invisible and can walk across the map wherever she wants. So that is something that, I think Riot have obviously taken into account when dealing with Evelynn. The other thing is that she's not as good in PC because she needs level 5 in most scenarios to be, or level 6 in most scenarios to be useful. To get to level 6, it usually takes 7 or 8 minutes minimum a lot of the time. To get to level 5, where you unlock your useful ultimate in Wildrift, it takes 5 minutes, which is why a lot of these, honestly, jungle picks that are traditionally level 5 focused jungle, level 6 focused junglers in PC, the ones that require their ultimates to be good, are much better in Wild Rift because you get your ultimates so quickly. So, you would never really see people like Rengar or Fizz being a super high tier jungle pick in League PC because it takes too long for them to be good. In Wild Rift, it takes 2 minutes for them to be good, and by that time, most of your laners have only taken about 5 or 6 waves. So at the end of the day, like, these level 5 junglers are just ridiculously good in Wild Rift because it's so quick for you to get your ultimate, which is why it really changes up what's meta on PC versus what's meta on Wild Rift because of that mechanic. But in terms of major changes here, Evelynn has dropped down a little bit. I still think Xin stays pretty high. There haven't been any other major jungle shifts. The only other big jungle nerf, I think, was to Amumu, but it wasn't, I'm not going to move Amumu out of B tier. He was already a pretty kind of like hard jungler to make work at high levels of play anyway. And even though the armor nerf definitely hurt him, it probably doesn't really change his position on the current ladder. I will say I have seen some good Graves players in solo queue recently, so maybe I'm underrating Graves, and I think I might even be overrating Shyvana. Shyvana feels really bad right now, but I think can especially work at high levels of play. A lot of people ask me why Master Yi is so low. One of the biggest questions that I get on my channel is, well, I see Master Yi's do really well at low elo all the time. Why is he so low on your tier list? And the reason being is that you can make anything work at low elo. Realistically, Master Yi works at low elo because he can essentially just farm for like 15 minutes straight and then come into the game and start obliterating people with 2 items. And if you play a jungle style like that, it will only get you so far. That's why I like to educate people on my channel. I like to say, okay, yes, I understand this can work at low elo, but realistically, if you were to take this pick into high levels of play, I think you're going to be struggling to make this work in the long term. And at high levels of play, I've seen I'm the Doom play Master Yi and win, but most people are relatively good at punishing Master Yi. So you end up losing double scuttle, you go too low in the jungle, you get invaded. And a lot of people also draft a lot of crowd control, and Master Yi is incredibly weak to crowd control. If you just lock him down with some single target or point and click CC, it's really difficult for you to recover, and actually your teamfight presence gets severely diminished. Master Yi thrives on chaotic, uncoordinated teamfights, and that's what generally happens at low elo. I think what's also worth noting is that Tryndamere and Yi are what we call stat check champions, so that when they get a certain amount of AD and crit and whatever, they just become really strong, and Riot doesn't want those types of champions to be good, because if they are, it means that at high level play, they can abuse that and hit those item thresholds really quickly and become dominant. So that, they're very low skill champions overall. And there is that element of rewarding higher skill level play champions. In terms of mid lane, I moved Diana down. Why did I move Diana down? A, she's not really getting seen getting played that much at the moment. I think she was really strong when Katarina was really strong, but now you have a rise of a lot of champions that can actually deal with her. And Lucian, I think Lucian is a super, super strong mid laner. I think the more and more we'll see Lucian played mid, the more and more he can dominate a lot of these mid lane matchups. I think he's I think he's in a pretty strong position. I think Lucian is actually released in a pretty good space right now. And I think he can very easily take over games from the mid lane. Other than that, there isn't actually many other changes. I was considering moving Kennen up because I have seen a lot more Kennen mid right now. But realistically, I don't know. I need a bit more time to kind of like feel the meta out here. But I do think that Diana moves down because a lot of the mid lane matchups that she used to be pretty good into. She's now, I think, struggling, and also people are not playing her as much. People have kind of gone back towards Ziggs. They've gone towards the new Lucian pickups, the Twisted Fates, etc. And so that's why I think we're seeing a little bit less Diana at the moment. Other than that, again, because it was such a small patch, I don't think much really changes. I think, Aurelia, Akali, Ziggs, Twisted Fate, Orianna, Galio, Corki, these are all really strong picks right now. I think Katarina's still good solo queue pick, very strong in the hands of the right player. Ari, pretty solid, pick as well. And moving down a little bit more, Annie, I think she's good in, lower elos, but obviously we'll start to kind of a little bit more undone because it's quite obvious what Annie wants to do. Annie wants to build up her stun and then use her stun in a team fight. I think the best chance that Annie has of taking people unaware is by going a very early proto belt enchant and then trying to use that to kind of set up early team fights and snowball from there. But other than that, not many major changes. I think Fizz is still solid, good mid lane pick, but obviously can be abused in certain matchups, and good Fizz players will definitely make him feel better than he actually is. But yeah, there we go. Let's move on to the AD carry role now. I don't think the changes to Ezreal really impact his standing. I think realistically he still remains as like the second best AD carry next to Kai'Sa. To be honest with you, the AD carry role didn't get massively impacted with the addition of Lucian and Senna. Lucian is definitely not as good AD carry as he is in some of his other lanes. I think you need to be prepared with an aggressive support with Lucian because he's relatively short range. But I think in terms of carry potential, things like Kai'Sa, Xayah, Jinx, Varus, they're all a little bit more consistent right now. But I think overall, the AD carry list hasn't massively changed. You'll notice that Senna is down there on the sort of the A/B tier area. The reason Senna has got a orange ring around her, a yellow ring around her, is because I think Senna's probably very good in competitive, where you can have a coordinated play around playing Senna with like a fasting support. So you play fasting Senna with like a strong kind of like Galio or something like that, or a Gragas, for instance. Anybody that can clear waves pretty quickly and doesn't get too punished very heavily by like a double range lane on the enemy side of things. So I think Senna has probably got a lot of value in competitive as an AD carry. I think in solo queue, you need to be duo at least to be able to play Senna as an AD carry properly. Otherwise, I think you're better off just playing fasting Senna support, which is fasting Senna is basically support Senna. It's just about who you pair her up with. If you pair her up with an AD carry, you're just playing fasting Senna support. If you pair her up with a strong tanky support that can clear waves and wants the gold, then obviously, you're going to see value out of her as like a fasting Senna AD carry. Other than that, don't think I anticipate any major shifts, from the AD carry at the bottom end of things. Let's go look over to the support role where there has been some changes. Okay, right, hear me out. I think Leona is absolutely insane right now. I think the changes they gave her on 2.3C are crazy good, and I think she's in a super strong spot as a support, and I'd love to hear if you guys have had success with her, because I feel like she is just really good. Plus, we have a very Enchanter dominant meta right now, and I think in an Enchanter dominant meta, you're going to have these strong engage supports doing really well. I also really think Senna is good. I do genuinely believe Senna, when played correctly in the right hands, is S+ tier. She's one of the few supports that you can absolutely carry the game with, and I have genuinely had a lot of success playing Senna. I think Braum got knocked down a little bit. I think those nerfs did really hurt him, and apart from that, there hasn't been any other major shifts other than moving Lux a little bit further down. I think we've seen a drop off of Lux because of these rise of heavy engage supports, and also because Senna is pretty good into enchanters that can't punish her very easily, and Lux, it's a bit hit or miss about whether she can punish Senna. But other than that, you're not going to see many changes here on the support list. It really was Senna and Leona shaking up the top end of the support tiers rather than anything major happening at the bottom end of things. I think Blitzcrank, again, you might see him played a bit more frequently in enchanter metas, but he is very reliant on hitting at just one ability of his entire kit. But I have seen more Blitzcrank than I had done previously, and people are starting to play him a little bit more regularly than they used to. But other than that, that is the entire list. That's my opinion on the current meta right now. Again, 2.3c was a relatively small patch, so I'm not envisioning major changes. But of course, there were some shifts, and Lucian and Senna definitely shift the meta up a little bit. I will be having to rework this tier list soon, because the more and more champions that get added, the more and more complex it becomes. So I'll find another way to do this, but it was good while it lasted. And I think it looks nice for the time being. Don't forget to screenshot it if you want to, and I hope you enjoyed. I will see you very soon. But of course, remember, I have a new job, so it might not be tomorrow.